4. Last words to the betrayer. For some minutes the apostles ate in silence, but under the influence of the Master's cheerful demeanor, they were soon drawn into conversation, and ere long the meal was proceeding as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred to interfere with the good cheer and social accord of this extraordinary occasion. After some time had elapsed, in about the middle of this second course of the meal, Jesus, looking them over, said, "I have told you how much I desired to have this supper with you, and knowing how the evil forces of darkness have conspired to bring about the death of the Son of Man, I determined to eat this supper with you in this secret chamber, and a day in advance of the Passover, since I will not be with you by this time tomorrow night. I have repeatedly told you that I must return to the Father. Now has my hour come, but it was not required that one of you should betray me into the hands of my enemies." When the 12 heard this, having already been robbed of much of their self-assertiveness and self-confidence by the parable of the feet-washing and the Master's subsequent discourse, they began to look at one another, while in disconcerted tones they hesitatingly inquired, "Is it I?" And when they had all so inquired, Jesus said, "While it is necessary that I go to the Father, it was not required that one of you should become a traitor to fulfill the Father's will. This is the coming to fruit of the concealed evil in the heart of one who failed to love the truth with his whole soul. How deceitful is the intellectual pride that precedes the spiritual downfall. My friend of many years, who even now eats my bread, will be willing to betray me even as he now dips his hand with me in the dish." And when Jesus had thus spoken, they all began again to ask, "Is it I?" And as Judas, sitting on the left of his Master, again asked, "Is it I?" Jesus, dipping the bread in the dish of herbs, handed it to Judas, saying, "You have said." But the others did not hear Jesus speak to Judas. John, who reclined on Jesus' right hand, leaned over and asked the Master, "Who is it? We should know who it is that has proved untrue to his trust." Jesus answered, "Already have I told you, even he to whom I gave the sop." But it was so natural for the host to give a sop to the one who sat next to him on the left, that none of them took notice of this, even though the Master had so plainly spoken. But Judas was painfully conscious of the meaning of the Master's words associated with his act, and he became fearful lest his brethren were likewise now aware that he was the betrayer. Peter was highly excited by what had been said, and leaning forward over the table he addressed John, "Ask him who it is, or if he has told you, tell me who is the betrayer." Jesus brought their whisperings to an end by saying, "I sorrow that this evil should have come to pass, and hoped even up to this hour that the power of truth might triumph over the deceptions of evil. But such victories are not won without the faith of the sincere love of truth. I would not have told you these things at this, our last supper, but I desire to warn you of these sorrows and so prepare you for what is now upon us. I have told you of this, because I desire that you should recall after I have gone that I knew about all these evil plottings, and that I forewarned you of my betrayal. And I do all this only that you may be strengthened for the temptations and trials which are just ahead." When Jesus had thus spoken, leaning over toward Judas, he said, "What you have decided to do, do quickly." And when Judas heard these words, he arose from the table and hastily left the room, going out into the night to do what he had set his mind to accomplish. When the other apostles saw Judas hasten off after Jesus had spoken to him, they thought he had gone to procure something additional for the supper, or to do some other errand for the Master, since they supposed he still carried the bag. Jesus now knew that nothing could be done to keep Judas from turning traitor. He started with 12, now he had 11. He chose 6 of these apostles, and though Judas was among those nominated by his first chosen apostles, still the Master accepted him, and had up to this very hour done everything possible to sanctify and save him, even as he had wrought for the peace and salvation of the others. This supper, with its tender episodes and softening touches, was Jesus' last appeal to the deserting Judas, but it was of no avail. Warning, even when administered in the most tactful manner and conveyed in the most kindly spirit, as a rule only intensifies hatred and fires the evil determination to carry out to the full one's own selfish projects when love is once really dead. 5. Establishing the Remembrance Supper. As they brought Jesus the third cup of wine, the cup of blessing, he arose from the couch, and taking the cup in his hands, blessed it, saying, "Take this cup, all of you, and drink of it. This shall be the cup of my remembrance. This is the cup of the blessing of a new dispensation of grace and truth. This shall be to you the emblem of the bestowal and ministry of the divine Spirit of truth. And I will not again drink this cup with you, until I drink in new form with you in the Father's eternal kingdom." The apostles all sensed that something out of the ordinary was transpiring as they drank of this cup of blessing in profound reverence and perfect silence. The old Passover commemorated the emergence of their fathers from a state of racial slavery into individual freedom. Now the Master was instituting a new remembrance supper as a symbol of the new dispensation wherein the enslaved individual emerges from the bondage of ceremonialism and selfishness into the spiritual joy of the brotherhood and fellowship of the liberated, faith sons of the living God. When they had finished drinking this new cup of remembrance, the Master took up the bread, and after giving thanks, broke it in pieces, and directing them to pass it around, said, "Take this bread of remembrance and eat it. I have told you that I am the bread of life. And this bread of life is the united life of the Father and the Son in one gift. The Word of the Father, as revealed in the Son, is indeed the bread of life." When they had partaken of the bread of remembrance, the symbol of the living Word of truth, incarnated in the likeness of mortal flesh, they all sat down. In instituting this remembrance supper, the Master, as was always his habit, resorted to parables and symbols. He employed symbols because he wanted to teach certain great spiritual truths in such a manner as to make it difficult for his successors to attach precise interpretations and definite meanings to his words. In this way he sought to prevent successive generations from crystallizing his teaching and binding down his spiritual meanings by the dead chains of tradition and dogma. In the establishment of the only ceremony or sacrament associated with his whole life mission, Jesus took great pains to suggest his meanings, rather than to commit himself to precise definitions. He did not wish to destroy the individual's concept of divine communion by establishing a precise form. Neither did he desire to limit the believer's spiritual imagination by formally cramping it. He rather sought to set man's reborn soul free upon the joyous wings of a new and living spiritual liberty. Notwithstanding the Master's effort thus to establish this new sacrament of the remembrance, those who followed after him in the intervening centuries saw to it that his expressed desire was effectively thwarted, in that his simple spiritual symbolism of that last night in the flesh has been reduced to precise interpretations and subjected to the almost mathematical precision of a set formula. Of all Jesus' teachings, none have become more tradition standardized. This supper of remembrance, when it is partaken of by those who are Son-believing and God-knowing, does not need to have associated with its symbolism any of man's puerile misinterpretations regarding the meaning of the divine presence. For upon all such occasions, the Master is really present. The remembrance supper is the believer's symbolic rendezvous with Michael. When you become thus spirit-conscious, the Son is actually present, and his Spirit fraternizes with the indwelling fragment of his Father. After they had engaged in meditation for a few moments, Jesus continued speaking. "When you do these things, recall the life I have lived on earth among you, and rejoice that I am to continue to live on earth with you and to serve through you. As individuals, contend not among yourselves as to who shall be greatest. Be you all as brethren. And when the kingdom grows to embrace large groups of believers, likewise should you refrain from contending for greatness, or seeking preferment between such groups." And this mighty occasion took place in the upper chamber of a friend. There was nothing of sacred form or of ceremonial consecration about either the supper or the building. The remembrance supper was established without ecclesiastical sanction. When Jesus had thus established the supper of the remembrance, he said to the apostles, "And as often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me. And when you do remember me, first look back upon my life in the flesh. Recall that I was once with you, and then by faith discern that you shall all sometime sup with me in the Father's eternal kingdom. This is the new Passover which I leave with you, even the memory of my bestowal life, the word of eternal truth, and of my love for you." the outpouring of my Spirit of truth upon all flesh." And they ended this celebration of the old but bloodless Passover in connection with the inauguration of the new Supper of the Remembrance by singing all together the 118th Psalm.